Welcome back to part 2 of the chat that I have with Kira Sutherland, our naturopath, herbalist, nutritionist, astrologer, and I think that's everything. Kira is going to talk a bit more about the actual elements in astrology and how they relate to health and why they're important. And we're also going to take a little look at the at the modes as well. I hope you enjoy the second part of this episode. Okay, so welcome back to part 2 of talking to Kira Sutherland, who is a naturopathic doctor.
No, it's not a doctor. That's in the US.
Not a doctor.
I'm just a naturopath, Australian naturopath.
Just a naturopath and an astrologer, nutritionist, homeopath.
Yes.
All of the above.
Yeah,
herbalist.
Yeah, all that.
Actually, I saw a thing on your Instagram. It was years ago now, probably, and you'd gone out with your daughter to pick some like wild herbs or something like that. And I was like, this is so witchy. It's so delightfully witchy.
It is witchy. We, deep down, the naturopaths were the witches. That's what, we were the herbalists. We were, the wise women. I mean, I know there's men doing it as well, or, other people. But yeah, that it's all intertwined, and it's a lot of fun that way. Yes. And I am raising my daughter just turned 15, and it's interesting because she's very interested in astrology, and she's teaching herself tarot at the moment, and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And I let her come to me and ask to be taught. It's always been around her, but I didn't want to force it on her. But no, it's amazing. Did you know Snapchat? I'm just gonna go segue here. So her age bracket is like obsessed with Snapchat. Do you know in Snapchat you actually enter in your date of birth and you can put in your time of birth? Snapchat has a whole thing where you can look up anybody's astrology, and it's really accurate if they put in the right birth time.
That's really interesting. I had no idea about that, actually, and it might be part of the reason why there is such a huge revival of, there's so many younger people now who are just so into it.
Yes. Oh my God. TikTok is full. I'm on social media.
Yeah.
TikTok is full of witches showing spells and doing tarot reads and astrology as well. Oh my God. How funny are some of those astrologers doing like comedy astrology skits? Those crack me up.
There's some really, really good ones on there. I love it.
There's some genius people.
The problem is with those things, like particularly at the moment, Instagram and TikTok are just absolute productivity drains for me. I think I'm just going to go on and have a quick look, and about an hour later I need to, this is like, I have to curfew myself from this because it's just too easy to get lost in that land. And I always think I'm going to do TikTok, and then I come away from it and I just don't do it.
Yeah, I know. I have somebody who helps me with social media a bit and, drives my train behind me work-wise. And they're always like, why are you not doing live Instagrams? Why are you not because I'm a talker and I'm a teacher, and it would be so much easier for me to do videos than it would be posts, but I just haven't gotten around to it. It's not like
it's just making that switch. I think for me, I found I like to write, but I'm so meticulous and so perfectionist when it comes to writing that actually what I do now is I find that my podcast and making videos, I just let it all out. And then when I come to afterwards, I then write a little a post that goes with it. And then I can be as in-depth or as brief as I like. And it's a kind of backwards way of doing it, but it's just the way
I need to do it.
Definitely. I mean, the podcasting is something that I didn't realize quite. I mean, I've always done podcasts. I had a different podcast with somebody else before, and I used to be an astrologer on somebody else's podcast, but it's something that I just enjoy. I guess it's my Gemini ascendant,
You're good at it. You got flow for podcast, I have to say. You do. I've been on lots of podcasts, and you have a flow and an ease to it that's really joyful.
That is good to know, because sometimes when you're sitting in a little room on your own in your house just doing it, you don't really know.
Yeah. I don't have a desire to do podcasts. I'm happy to be on everybody else's podcast.
Yeah.
but I need to do that's my thing this month. I'm going to do Instagram Live.
Do it. Definitely. Yeah, you have to. You've basically made yourself accountable now, because if people listen to this episode and then say, where's Kira's video?
Yep, I'll do it. No, it's so easy. Like I can, yeah. It's not like I can't talk.
Exactly. And you look great. So put those two together.
We'll just get the good lighting going and they'll go away. Yeah.
All about lighting.
I'm going to do it.
I'm going to hold you accountable to that.
I'll give you the credit, Stephanie.
Yeah, please do. I would gladly take that. So moving on to our medical astrology, we've already discussed so many interesting things and gone down so many interesting avenues. But for the listeners and the viewers today, I wondered if you could impart some knowledge to them, which could help them to work with their charts, their own medical astrology better. And I know that the elements are, and I think a lot of people learning astrology kind of can't be bothered with the elements, and they can't be bothered with the modes. And I make a big thing out of making sure everybody knows about elements and modes and understands what they are. So I've done shows on each of them. But with medical astrology, I think it's a good place to start. So sort of, you can break it down quite easily that way. We don't have to go down too many rabbit holes that way. How do the elements really connect with medical astrology?
Yeah, so the elements, I totally agree with you. People like forget about the elements, yet they're so important in regular astrology, as I call all astrology, and then there's medical astrology, just to quantify that.
Yeah.
They are so important, especially in medical. You know, if we think about traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, they have the elements, and things are hot and they're cold and they're dry and they're moist, and we have the same thing, and it's such a great basis to look at our physical constitution, but also just how to balance ourselves out or simplify. You know, learning all the planets and every sign and all the medical conditions can be really overwhelming, whereas I find when people start with the elements in medical, it's really user friendly. Like in the course I just taught, the 5-part medical astrology for health practitioners, literally the first lecture I gave them was on the elements, because it's the most user friendly to go, oh, here's my imbalances, this is what I need to do. And you can give really clear instructions about how to heat somebody up or cool them off or put them in the water, or, you know, whatever it is we're trying to do. So the elements are just, they're just genius, you know. And you want me to lecture a little bit on them? Do you want me to describe them a little bit? Is that what you're wanting?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, anything that the listeners can sort of sit there and go, that is me, or I need to do that.
Yeah. So typically, if we're really looking at the elements, so if you only know your sun, moon, and your rising, you could just look at those 3 elements. Although sometimes our elemental makeup will be different than just looking at those 3, but you could just take sun, moon, and ascendant, or you can add up the whole chart. So it depends, or, you know, a lot of programs will add up your elemental makeup for you. So you can look at it that way. But usually we have one dominant element. And there's often one element we're very deficient in. Not always. Every now and then I'll do a chart read and I'm like, wow, this person is in balance. And it's interesting to meet those people that have an elemental, you know, balance, because they operate from this really calm, balanced, I hate to use that word again, but just this really even keeled kind of energy. And I mean, you know, I know you, Stephanie, have, you know, quite strong element like I do, and it's like, no, I live my life in this fast lane of this fire element, and you know, pulling myself into other elements can be really tricky. Yet those are the things that make me feel better, is when I learn not to overuse my dominant element, and I learn to kind of bolster up those elements that I am missing. Yeah. So, you know, sun, moon, ascendant, or whether you're doing your whole chart, but, you know, the idea is, like, if did you want to say anything before I kind of rattle on about each element?
I'll just say that I'm underrepresented in earth. I'm overrepresented with air, and I do lack, I mean, fire isn't particularly strong for me either. But you know, fire and water are kind of in my chart, but it's like earth is just like, only my sun. And and you know, when I do talks or when I do anything, I have to make sure I ground myself. Like I learned about grounding, and that really helps me to just anchor myself. But I can get so off into the air stuff. I really can.
And it's interesting because your sun is in Earth, so there should be some grounding, but because it's kind of all by itself and there's so much air, you get taken away. But yeah, that idea of knowing how much grounding you need, and then your sun actually feels more heard and more supported. And I also use the houses a lot, you know, and I would look at, you know, if we're going into more advanced astrology, I look at the natal chart for its traditional earth, fire, air, water rulership of houses. So I look at the first house, no matter what the rising sign is. And I do see the first house as a fire house and the second house as a earth house. So I would also look at that, because that can even skew the elements even further in another direction or balance you out a little bit. Yeah, like your sun is in the eighth house. Yeah. So you got that earth and then water, which is also something you don't have a ton of from memory.
I've got
a bit.
I've got moon and Saturn in water.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
But it also makes sure, you know, even though the sun is in a, you know, an earth sign, because that eighth house is a watery nature to it, it dilutes some of that earth even further, right? Which is probably where you even feel more ungrounded.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I'm super dominant in fire, but all my fire is naturally in fire houses as well. So it stokes that. So I have this, you know, all or absolutely nothing kind of feel. And then I'm very underrepresented in air.
Oh.
Yeah. I only have a south node and Uranus in air. That's it.
Wow.
Yep.
That is interesting.
Nothing else.
And how does that manifest for you?
You know, I'm such a reader and I'm such a information junkie in some ways. I almost think that's how I've compensated, is I am a book addict and I'm an education junkie, and I will act before I think. And so sometimes I really have to kind of, you know, pull myself back and think about it more. Yeah, it's funny because I have so little air, but I don't always feel that.
I think
interesting.
It's from my early days of the LSA, I remember Frank talking about some people who have not a lot of air, not a lot of earth in their chart, and they tend to be the people that might, you know, open the front door naked sometimes. Like they're just so like not even thinking about the body. And it really reminded me of
That's like so funny.
When I say myself, I don't open the front door naked, people, by the way, but he said, you know, people with like a lack in earth might buy clothes that just don't fit them properly. And I've always been somebody who sort of like buys like the wrong size, and I just deal with it, and I wear like uncomfortably tight clothes sometimes. And you know, I'm learning how to like actually treat my body the way it needs to be treated, because the body aspect, it just doesn't seem to be, it doesn't take priority. And if somebody gave me money,
describing things.
If somebody gave me money to treat myself, I'd spend it on gadgets, computer stuff, Aquarius stuff, instead of like treating myself. So it's funny but sometimes these elements, they when they're it's like that naughty child at the back of the class who, you know, you can ignore it for a long time, and suddenly they'll just scream out at you, and you suddenly think, whoa, I've just like ignored this element in my chart, and now it's like misbehaving. So
I'm trying to think of that for me. I mean, I'm such a book addict, such an information junkie.
I would say you're a Saggy moon though, so that kind of
it kind of goes there too. But I have this habit of thinking if I buy the book, then I have the information. You know, I'll purchase a course and not get around to it, but I'm like, oh, like I it's the idea of getting the information, but then actually getting the information are two different things. I'll have to think about what the air that way.
You're gonna have to do the air stuff to think about how it affects you.
And you know what else happens for me is if I start thinking, then I really implode and I go into a worry, thinking. I kind of overthink. It's like I don't know how to I don't know how to turn it off.
There's no kind of moderation when you're, I think when you're underrepresented, if you've got a lot of it can be that you're absorbed in that life and that's just the way it is. But if it's underrepresented, especially with water signs, Frank would say, you know, if they don't have a lot of water in the chart, it can be that they kind of don't operate on an emotional level, and then when they do, the floodgates open and they can't switch off the tap from dripping. It's just
so true.
Yeah,
it's so true. God, he's so good.
He's fantastic, isn't he?
Oh my God, it's the stories that he tells that really so with the elements medically, you know, fire is, you know, whether you have a lot of fire in your chart or a little or medium, but fire is, you know, it's the hottest element, so we consider it hot and dry. And you know, it's heartburn, and it's your animal heat. And it's, you know, when we started lecturing, and I get excited, I have all this heat rise through my body. So when I stood up and I said, I'm not leaving you, I was actually going and grabbing myself a little fan.
Oh, I really wish I had a fan right here, right now.
Oh, I love fans. Have fans. So there's this whole sense of always feeling hot, and it, you know, fire is action, it's sport, and it's, you know, body heat. It's aggravation, and it is anger as well, and irritation, and that feistiness about us. But it's anything to do with heat and digestive fire as well in the body. Does that explain fire for you a little bit?
Oh yes, definitely.
So, you know, people with strong fire, they really need to watch their liver. Like, to the actual term to be livid, to be angry, to, oh my God, I'm so livid. Actually, what they're saying is, I'm so liverish, because your liver is where you hold your anger. So, you know, we have a lot of old terminology, like if you go back to medicine from a couple hundred years ago, what we call Renaissance medicine, we have what were known as the temperaments and the humors. So we have the temperaments were, you know, choleric, which is fire. We have melancholic, which is earth. Phlegmatic, which is water. And see, I didn't remember to say the air one. we have sanguine, which is air. And in choleric, which is the fire one, we also have the term, oh, he's hot under the collar, which is basically calling someone choleric. You're calling them fiery. And so we have all this old terminology that we don't even know that we use, that goes back to that. And so, you know, gallbladder issues, liver issues, congestion, too much heat, too much blood. It's all this too much fire. Fire creates ulcers, it creates irritation, it's inflammation. So we need to cool them down. You know, you go to that opposite, what's the opposite of fire? We have water. You know, it's moist and it's cold and it soothes. You know, fire heats up water, but water puts out fire, right? And so you always look to that opposite element, and, you know, getting them in the water and having someone with strong fire. You know, you don't want them eating all the fiery foods. You don't want them having too much caffeine. You don't want them eating too much chili. They might like it. You know, there's a bit of an addiction to what we have, something strong, you know, but too much, you know, ginger and the chili family and all the hot stuff, you know, a horseradish like wasabi stokes the fire. So, you know, really strong, you know, someone with strong water needs heating up, so they can use the fire foods like ginger and turmeric and chili, and those things will warm them up and they'll dry them out, because the water element people have too much moisture and too much softness, and this will invigorate them and dry them out. Whereas too much fire, they need cooling and they need moistening. And so, you know, your summer fruits, you know, think about you're about to have summer solstice. It's hot. You don't feel like eating chili. You feel like all the beautiful fruit bring in that water, or like people I mean, I'm American, so we put ice in everything, but it's actually not that. I love super cold water. Whereas if you hand me tepid water, I think that's the most disgusting thing on the planet. Like, why would I want room temperature water?
I'm
Whereas the
that person.
Virgos, which tepid water.
Oh yeah, I can't drink it. I have to have water, cold water from the fridge. Like I can't.
Yeah.
Warm water is just like,
and in
what
my
is that?
house, it's so funny because I live with 2 air signs, and so they can forget to put the jug of cold water back in the fridge. And then in the middle of summer, I'll be like, "Where's cold water?" Yeah, so that's fire and water to balance each other out, and it's getting people in the water or into streams or into foot baths or, drinking water. There's so many different ways you can replenish water for somebody who doesn't have a lot of water or somebody who has too much fire. And it's all really, it's not rocket science balancing the elements. It's quite simple. So then we have, air, which is, we call that the sanguine temperament. And it's all about thinking. It's all about the mind and the nervous system and, forgetting to be in the body. And so, strong air has that incredible creativity, that thinking, that processing, that analysis. But again, you look to that opposite sign, which is really earth and needing. And it's so funny how often, like you talked about earlier, you've got this really strong air, but not a lot of earth.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how often we don't have that opposite element. Not always. But again, it's grounding, it's eating root vegetables, it's having soups and stews and things that pull you back into the body. Or my original astrology teacher would say, air people need to do lusty activities to get into the body and use their 5 senses. And she would talk about even like sex and stuff like that. Like, she was hilarious. She was a strong air. So whereas, those with too much earth, it's about getting past the inertia. They can get so stuck and focused and fixed, and getting them actually moving, and whether it's dance or into their brain, or it depends on what other element is as well. So we have this, getting them going, trying to make them doing something, not at speed, because that's going to make some of them uncomfortable, but earth can have things solidifying in the body, and the earth is cold and dry, and so you get this crystallization and things don't flow and move as easily. So again, you need to warm them up, but they also need moisture. And so it's bringing in, just to backtrack, air is actually considered warm and moist. People often think of air as being dry because too much air, too much wind does create dry and irritation. But the air element is actually like steam, and it has this slight moisture to it. If you think of it, it is like springtime. There is that dampness in the air as the heat is rising. Yeah. So air is a really interesting element like that. So it's not super wet like water, but it does have that moisture to it. But again, too much air does create dryness. Has any of that made sense? I'm just
yeah, absolutely.
That all without looking at anything. Yeah. So the elements are just this beautiful way to kind of go, even if it's, you don't even know your elemental makeup, but when the moon is in a different element, I think tracking the moon is amazing. We're looking at what sign it's in for what that personality is. But I think just looking at the moon by its element, you're in 2.5 days of the air element, and how to use that and facilitate that for you. I think it's a really nice way to embody the elements in a cyclical nature. On fire moons, you go and do more sport or more activity, or light more candles, or just celebrate each. I think we just need to celebrate each element in some ways, within our body, within our food, within our surrounding.
Yeah, I agree. And I recommend to all of the listeners to, I've recorded a show on it as well, to track the moon around the chart. It's the quickest way to really familiarize yourself with what that sign or element feels like. You know, and we've got a yearly opportunity to go round the chart with the sun and really spotlight those areas, but the moon is a monthly chance to really emotionally connect on a feeling level, and you know, familiarize yourself with aspects of your own natal chart, but also just those astrological aspects in general, really.
And it's such a great time to just play with each element, right? I mean, the sun itself, but also the element of that. Like, where's the moon today? I don't even, it's terrible that I don't even
Oh, that's
know.
a good question.
What's the moon in today?
Oh my gosh. I know, it's
Isn't that funny that I don't know?
The more you do it, the less you're in touch with it all. So it's at 29. Oh, how interesting. It's at 29 Libra, which is where my Pluto is.
Yeah.
Which is
oh,
you know,
there you go. I was
going deep
Libra.
and dirty on the health astrology there, you know, getting into the bowels of it.
I know. And now moving into, it'll be Scorpio soon, right?
Yeah, so we can start unpicking it properly.
So, and we're moving into more intensity, right? More intensity, and yeah.
Definitely. So you mentioned like the liver with fire.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting, and like with air, like, you know, being hot under the collar. So what other kind of connections can people make with their own element, which maybe, you know, maybe not necessarily to look out for, but just to sort of like make those connections for themselves to understand how the elements kind of speak to parts of the body, for example?
Yeah, well, so air is about the nervous system and the brain. And so it's about communication and neurotransmitters and how the body talks to itself. So in some ways, hormones fall into a little bit of hormones get ruled by everybody, but the planet Mercury actually rules all hormones, because Mercury is the messenger of the gods. And he actually, you know, if we think of Hermes or Mercury, he was actually able to go from Mount Olympus all the way to the underworld and back. He was the only god that was allowed to go into both realms. And he was the communicator. You know, he brought souls down to the underworld. And I love that Mercury as a planet rules all the hormones, because hormones are messengers of the body. We make hormones in one spot of the body typically, then they travel to another part of the body or somewhere else on that organ and tell it what to do. And so there's this whole communication thing that happens with our hormones and with the air elements. So air is very much about your body talking to itself. It is your analyzing, but it's also your nervous system and that whole fight, flight, digest, relax. So, you know, people with strong air really need to watch. Yeah, they need to nourish that nervous system more than anything.
I do have to say, as an airy person, I do have to, the hormonal stuff, like the older I get, the more I realize how much hormones have to answer for.
Oh yes.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, you're also sun in the sun. I can pull apart with your chart. You're also sun in the eighth. Eighth has some, you know, reproductive hormones as well. But yeah, hormones are enormous, especially for you know, female bodies or people born with female hormones. You know, male hormones. So when I'm talking about male and female, I'm talking about sex assignment at birth or hormones from sex assignment at birth. I'm not talking about genders, just because I don't want to offend anybody.
Of course.
But when we're talking about the physical body, I do tend to need to use those words. So you know, with a male body, you have more of a 24-hour cycle with your hormones, whereas the female body has, you know, really that monthly cycle with hormones, that lunar cyclical nature of, you know, that low hormone phase to the high hormone phase. And as you were saying, you realize as you get older how much more influenced you are by your hormones. I'm not discounting men and their hormones, but we have a more complex cascade of hormones and more stuff can go wrong with it. And so we do need to be more, I want everybody to be in tune with their body. But yeah, as you get older as a female, you realize we play we need to give a lot of play to our hormone cycles and how our body operates off of them. Absolutely. More so than people born male. Not that they don't, but they don't have the dramatic fluctuations that we get, unfortunately.
Yes, I have to say.
Consider themselves lucky.
Yeah, I do. I just kind of think that the older I get, the more I'm like, oh, hormones are assholes.
They're assholes, and then they're amazing, right? Like when you learn to harness it, or you learn to find that rhythm of that cyclical nature. And again, it's we're so far removed from living under nature's guise that we're kind of taught, and this is me more being a naturopath here, but we're really taught to kind of ignore things, or, oh, if your hormones out of whack, go on the pill and we'll just suppress them all so you don't have to have those fluctuations. And we're just not taught enough when we're young to clue in and go, hey, it's okay to not feel great some days. Hey, it's okay to feel like you want to stay in bed and eat chocolate and watch The Notebook or whatever you want to watch. I think there's a beauty if we were, society it has us on a male clock at the moment, right? It has let's say yang, has this very yang drive, and that's not how a lot of our bodies are meant to be operating on.
No, definitely. So hormones are connected really with air then?
Well, they're connected with Mercury, but they're also connected. I mean, they're connected with a lot of the signs. So you can't, like, Mars is your, testosterone and your androgens and your male hormones. You've got Venus, which is a lot of the female hormones, also thyroid. So the hormones, and then you've got Pluto, which also has some sex hormone rulership as well. So because hormones do so many different things in the body, they have multiple rulership. So you can't kind of say it's only this or this. Even the moon has rulership of some hormones. So hormones are a bit tricky like that. And then we could even bring in Jupiter if you want, with, the pancreas and hormones are spread between all the planets and signs, really. Yeah.
It's a big system, so it has to have its many intricacies, I guess.
It is. And, medical astrology has, like we say, oh, Aries is the head and Taurus is the neck. But in reality, the brain is in the head, and the brain and the nervous system are really Gemini. So there's this massive crossover in medical astrology. So it's not completely black and white, right? We can't go, oh, it's only that or that. I was teaching, Frank often has me teach for the LSA, and Frank now runs a lot of things in China. So I've been lecturing to China for the last 2 or 3 years under LSA, which has just been amazing. But it's
I've literally just done like 4 classes on Lilith for China as well. So
have you? Oh my God, that would be okay. So you know what it's like lecturing for China.
Oh, yeah,
amazing. But they want it black and white. Like they're like, it is this or it's this.
It's very different, isn't it?
Oh my God. Oh, I would love to listen to those classes. Maybe not the Chinese version, but it's amazing how many times in medical astrology I'm like, this is not black and white. This is gray. I even had to check if they had that expression that things are gray.
Yeah.
Because constantly I'm like, it's ruled by this and it's ruled by this. And then they're always saying to me, but you said it was ruled by this, and it's like.
That's interesting because they have their own medicine system as well. So is their medicine system black and white?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
It's interesting. Yeah,
it is. It is. But, when you're trying to learn something from a foreign language as well, you're like, I just need it to fit in this box.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't always do that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we talked a bit about fire, and we've done a bit of air. So what about the other elements?
Yeah. So we talked about earth. We talked about how it's the physical, it's things crystallize, and it's form, and it's heavier, and it's cold and dry. So it needs warmth, needs moisture, because it can really lock things in and age things, and it creates heaviness, and it can create weight gain and stagnation. Things can get stuck. So here we want to pull in a lot more air things, whether it's, air activities and getting people not so much in their physical, but up into the, up into the brain, or we get them moving through fire and, doing things. I can send through for you a great little chart I've done on foods for all the elements if you want for your
that
listeners.
Would be great.
Yeah. So it really kind of explains them. And so you can, think about, so, heavy, people with strong earth, I don't want them eating a lot of root vegetables and really heavy cooked meals. You want them on lighter foods. You want them to have more oil in the diet to moisten them up and lubricate what can be very dry. So, they will go for their starches and their sugars and the things that can lead to weight gain and that grounding. They almost go too much there. So we want to lighten it up. And again, you will, you often see this. Taurians love spices, right? I often find, you'll go out to, you have to be careful if you're a fire sign and you have a bunch of Taurus friends and you go out to Indian food, because they will try to order the hottest, spiciest. They're like, I'll have the beef vindaloo extra hot.
Yeah.
And me as a fire sign, I'm like, I want the mildest butter chicken possible. And, and they're having their beef vindaloo and they're having that massive sweat. And it looks uncomfortable to a fire sign. I'm like, oh my God, that looks so uncomfortable. They love it because it's actually balancing out their earth, right? They're doing this fire heat, and we often do naturally go for the foods that help balance us out. Yeah. So we have the water. And water, again, weight gain, bloating, feeling squishy. Water is soft, but it holds things, so they can have that bloated water retention, too much moisture, too much mucus in the body, whether it be in the lungs or in the digestive tract. Things are too moist, and that can hold ailments as well. Like a lot of water in a chart will attract viruses and bacteria, because it's, water is magnetic in some ways, not just Scorpios. But it will hold stuff. And, mucus is there to protect you. It actually grabs onto bacteria and tries to get it out of the body. But again, things can get a little bit stuck and stagnant with water and bloated and squishy. That's the best way I can describe it.
Well, I can relate with my swollen ankles in the evenings with my lovely pregnancy swollen ankles.
And pregnancy is a real water state in some ways, isn't it? It's very earth water, and you've got that roundness and that moisture coming.
Oh yeah. It's a whole different experience.
It is. And it's really interesting when you're a very different element to what it feels like to be pregnant.
Yeah.
To be very, with all your strong air, it's like, oh, I have to be in my body because I'm growing somebody else.
It's very weird, actually. And it's funny because everyone you speak to who's been through it has had a different experience. And some people just love it and some people don't. And I have to say I'm on the fence, because there's aspects of it that are wonderful, but there's so much of it that has been really hard. And I'm not happy with the fact that now I am very conscious of my body, because I used to like to walk and talk. So I'd have my headphones in, doing a WhatsApp message for someone, go for a speed walk somewhere. It's how I used to empty my head and get some exercise, basically.
You probably have no lung capacity anymore.
I don't have lung capacity. I've got sciatica. I can't walk really anymore. Like I can, but really not far. There's just so much going on with my body that I am so body focused right now. And I just keep thinking, like, it sounds really horrible. I don't want to be that person, but I do keep thinking, I cannot wait to get my body back. Because but in some ways, I think, it's that kind of thing where it's making me conscious of my body, which is probably the first time in my life where I'm constantly conscious of it. Whereas,
it's a big thing for air.
It is, because like normally I don't pay that much attention to myself. And I'm just in my head all the time. It's all of my personal planets in air. I've got Pluto in air, I've got my ascendant in air. So I'm just really constantly, my brain is buzzing always. And I'm always lining up the next project. And I think, oh, I can't wait to take a break, and then the next thing I'm doing is just like taking all my time up, because I'm like constantly focusing on the next thing without thinking about my body and slowing down. And I've, for the first time ever, had to really slow down.
Strong fire. I feel you. I was the same. I lived at the bottom of a hill. Sorry, I lived at the top of a hill, and I worked at the bottom of the hill. My clinic was just, 4 blocks from where I was living. And so I would walk to work and walk home. And I run marathons. Like, I do Ironman triathlon for 12 hours. Like, I'm this sporty fire person. And partway through my pregnancy, I couldn't even walk 2 blocks up a very steep hill, I'm going to say.
I just have to say that it makes me feel so much better.
I would have to sit and take time. Oh no. And I was fit, and I would have to take, because you got no lungs. The baby takes up all those, you lose part of that air element as you have this strong, pregnancy is a water earth experience, right?
Wow.
It's such a, to bring it back to that. And it's amazing. You lose your fire, like your ability to do a lot, and you lose, the baby actually takes up part of that lung capacity, right? It's pushing that stuff out of the way.
Baby's literally taking my breath away.
Yes. Yeah. And it's amazing it's amazing when your bladder space comes back too.
Oh, I can't wait.
So with the elements, to bring in more air is, thinking, and it's a doing element and movement. And as much as people don't think of dance as being an air thing, but just getting that body flow, air has a flow to it that I often find, turning on some music and, using that auditory as well as getting into the body to, bring in that air element. So it's common sense stuff with each of the elements, really. I think I've gone through each element now. Have we gone through each element? I think
so, yeah. I just you were talking about flow and dance and stuff like that, because you can associate dance with water, really. You could associate it with earth, but you could also associate it with air. But I was wondering, because I was doing qigong a little while ago, and I feel like that's quite airy, actually.
It is. It's got that. Yet it's slow enough. Well, it's also about the breath, isn't it? Qigong is all about the breath in and out. So a lot of the martial arts, as much as we're going to go, oh, that's fire, oh, that's grounding and slow. Like if you think of yoga's yoga's flowy, but it's very grounding, yet it's all about the breath, and the breath is all about air. So a lot of those slower practices actually bring in multiple elements.
So slowing it down you can actually be more integrative with it, actually, and actually pull in different elements to balance out your practice.
I agree. Yes.
So what about cardio? So. Cardio, is that more fiery?
That's just fire.
That's just pure fire. I'm not so great with cardio.
Yeah. Cardio is fire. Doing weights would be earth. Going swimming would be, or skiing in some ways. Or being near, skiing is frozen water. So it is very Aries. I mean, not Aries, very fire, but, being in the snow in some ways that's pulling in the water element, but it's just very cold. So
do you feel like the modes play into medical in the same way that the elements do, or do they help it to express itself in a slightly different way?
So with the modes, I don't use the modes so much about treatment, but the modes are really, really vital to look at in medical astrology. And I'm probably even more focused on it than when you heard me lecture 10 years ago. The modes are very much involved in how illnesses travel through the body and what parts of the body experience certain ailments. So, there's the idea that, strong cardinal in a chart is going to get sick and kind of do it quickly and then be over it. Whereas a strong fixed, they have a stronger constitution. They don't get sick as easy, but when they get it, it kind to get stuck there because it's fixed and it's, you know, things
Right.
get stuck. Whereas the mutable, it's like, oh, they get sick and then it feels like they're getting better, and it kind of comes back and forth a bit. And you do have that energetic principle with the modes, but what you also have is ailments happen by mode. So I don't know if I taught you this in lectures, but like if you look at the fixed mode, you know, everything happens in its opposition and its square in a mode, right? You know, you got Taurus to Scorpio, Leo to Aquarius. So if you think about an ailment like hypothyroid, so when somebody's thyroid starts going too slow. So the thyroid is in the neck. It is very Taurus to have thyroid issues. You know, we can go Venus, we could also go Mercury, but let me just stick to Taurus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thyroid, you know, in that neck region, when your thyroid goes hypo or slow, you tend to gain weight, which is very Taurus fixed. Your metabolism slows down. You also, one of the side effects is you can start, if your thyroid actually starts growing a bit, you have nodules at thyroid, you can have a hoarse voice. But one of the biggest things is if you're a female, you start having reproductive issues. The period disappears, or the period can get really heavy, but you start having reproductive hormone imbalances, and you will often get constipation. Both of those reproductive issues and the bowels are ruled by that opposite sign of Scorpio, because the energy goes back and forth between that opposition. Now, another thing that happens with hypothyroid is you can often have blood pressure problems.
Mm.
And blood pressure, you've got Leo ruling the heart and Aquarius ruling the circulation. So you can start to have blood pressure problems. You can start to have a slowing of a heart rate. You also then start to have lack of blood flow to the extremities. And as much as the extremities, you think, oh, Pisces feet, Gemini hands, what's happening is the circulation, Aquarius, isn't able to get out to where it should be. So you can see how something going wrong with a thyroid, Taurus, then takes up the rest of the mode in its ailment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And it's mind blowing. I don't know if I taught you that when if I focused on that the
Not
year
sure
that
that
I
you
was
did.
lecturing at LSA. And it's amazing to look at how ailments take up whole modes in their presentation. Now, it's not to say you can't be a Libra cardinal person, and you know, plenty of Libras I know have thyroid issues, but I'm just saying ailments take up those 4 quarters of that cross.
That's really interesting. It's so multifaceted. I mean, health is not a simple subject anyway.
Oh my God, it's so complex. It's
and astrology
like
isn't either. You know, it's you know, and like you said, it doesn't just fit into a little box that's nice and easy to put away. You know, you're talking about you know, the heart and Leo and Aquarius sort of ruling that sort of, you know, the heart and the blood, the circulation system.
Yep.
But then, you know, you've got Venus that rules the veins and Mars rules the blood, and, you know, all of this. So it's like, you know, it's really not overly simple, but it's a fascinating area to sort of really dig deep, isn't it?
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say to you, one thing I really, you'd said to me, Scorpios have to sweat.
Yes.
And I just thought that's so interesting, because I love, like, my Scorpio moon, I love any exercise where I really break a sweat, and then I can just jump in the shower and I can be showering and still sweating. Like, it's the nicest feeling in the whole world. And it really, I am always in such a more positive mood once I've done that.
And that's because Scorpio rules detoxification channels, and sweat is one of the big ones that you can access the most easily at your own whim. And so doing that is helping your body rulership actually do its job, whether it's exercise and sweating, or going into a sauna or a steam room or stuff like that. It's that getting that system going balances the body. Absolutely.
Nothing is more relaxing to me than going into like a sauna or a steam room.
Agreed.
Like, I could have a massage, which I love, but nothing
Yeah.
else relaxes me like a sauna or a steam room.
Isn't it
When I come
amazing? Yeah.
home, the way
So
I
good.
sleep after that is just, it's the relaxation. I can't achieve it any other way. It's no other way apart from, you know, if you've given morphine or something, like, you know, the most natural way to reach that state of relaxation for me is definitely through doing that. So my Scorpio moon has a lot to say thank you to you for teaching me how to truly relax. And one other thing I wanted to say was that when I came for my reading with you, and we had a look at my chart, you mentioned, we looked at my moon and you know, my sixth house, and you recommended a book to me called The Period Repair Manual, by, I think, Lara Briden.
Lara Briden.
So I bought her book and I read it, and it was really amazing. And then I kind of forgot about it for a long time. And then about just over a year ago, I decided that I was having all sorts of like issues, like I had scalp issues and things like that. And I kind of thought, my sister recommended that I try cutting out dairy. So I thought, okay, I'll try. So I really properly did it. Like I really cut out dairy. And suddenly I noticed that my periods were like completely, like I had to put a week in my diary every single month, and 2 days in particular where I thought that I would not be able to do anything because I'd be in so much pain, I'd be struggling. And I'd have to factor in PMT as well and be like, I'm going to be hell. I'm going to be the devil incarnate.
Scorpio moon.
And
it all went away.
Basically they became more manageable. And I don't know what it did for my reproductive system, but I actually conceived as well that year.
I'm having a baby.
Exactly. So it's quite amazing to think that something as simple as dairy can impact you so hugely. And it's something that you must have spotted, not necessarily that it was dairy, but like recommending that book to me, knowing that I had to have that kind of equipment in my toolkit to understanding myself just from looking at my chart. Blew my mind. I found a blog post online about it as well. I was like, oh, let me have a look. Oh yes, it can really affect it. And then I realized the blog I was reading was Lara Briden. I was like, oh, that's that book that Kira recommended.
So she's one of my best friends. So I have to actually state that. And she is a genius. So she is a naturopathic doctor because she trained in Canada, where it's a doctorate rather than an undergraduate. And she specializes in women's hormones. And the Period Repair Manual is just the most amazing book. But yes, the first thing when people come in to see a naturopath with period problems, one of the first things we do is we look at food sensitivities or what you're eating and how it affects, again, it's sixth house. And in Placidus, you have your moon in the sixth, don't you?
I do. Yeah.
So, and we would have talked about how what you eat is going to greatly affect all your lunar stuff, which is also about female reproductive stuff. And moon in the sixth tends to have food sensitivities as well. And the moon rules dairy food, by the way. And fourth house and the moon. So, but yeah, period trouble, the first thing we do naturopathically is take people off all dairy. And I'm not talking sort of going off dairy, because if people go, oh, I'll go off all dairy, except I'll still have my cappuccino every morning, that doesn't cut it. It's like you have to go off all dairy, and it takes about 2 weeks to really see a massive difference to get the dairy out of the system. But it is amazing. And Lara is vicious about taking people off dairy. It's amazing. Because it'd be very inflammatory for people. And once you have a lot of inflammation, then the hormones get interrupted. And she's actually just written another book, not for the phase you're in right now, but she came out with a book at the beginning of this year called, oh my God, she'll kill me for not remembering this. It's sitting on my desk. So there's the Period Repair Manual. I think it's called the Hormone Repair Manual. And it's for women once they turn 40 and beyond. So it's not a perimenopause, menopause book. It's kind of like once you hit 40, how to balance the hormones as you head towards, perimenopause can start at 45 for some women. Everyone thinks of menopause as 50, but it's it's that whole decade before you hit menopause.
I have a friend who was in my
herself.
class at school, and she is already going through the menopause. Like it's been confirmed by her doctor, and she's like 30, I think she's 38.
Yeah, but that's perimenopause, not menopause. But and women are starting to have that earlier as well. So, you know, having some symptoms in the early 40s is not unusual. But you just come out with the book called The Hormone Repair Manual.
All right. So, that's going to be another one on my reading list.
Yeah.
So
she and I often lecture together, actually.
Oh, do you?
She lectures on women and hormones, and I bring in the women and sport, because this is my sports nutrition side. So on my other website, which is just kirasutherland.com.au, which is my naturopathic sports nutrition site, there's actually links to some webinars. There's links to podcasts we've done together, and there was a whole, later this year, she and I are doing a whole webinar series together. On women and hormones and health. So
women cannot know too much about hormones and health. That is something that we all need to know.
We're taught nothing about it.
It's amazing. Well, it feels like it's naturally wrapping up. And it's probably quite late where you are right now, isn't it?
It's my bedtime.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't keep you up any longer. I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm sorry about some of the gremlins. We've had some technical issues.
That's all right.
It does happen in this day and age, but just for listeners, I wanted to let you guys know that I saw Kira. I can't even remember when it was that I saw you now. It was like,
I think
it was quite
like
a long
8
time.
years ago.
8 years ago. And
it's 8 years ago.
The things you picked out in my chart as, you know, areas for me to pay attention to and to be mindful and to work on them in a positive way are all areas which, as I have done this, it's taken me years to kind of really do it all, because you can't do it overnight. Have really benefited me in such a hugely positive way. So if anybody wants to learn about themselves from a health perspective and working with themselves in a positive way to not just, you know, positive mental health, how about positive physical health and self-care? You know, Kira is somebody who can really help with that. It's true.
Stephanie, you're gorgeous. It's so much fun to do a podcast with you.
It is fun, isn't it?
So much fun. I know, it is really fun. I love your insight too. What I love is working with other astrologers, because they have such great insight into other things that sometimes I can't verbalize as well. And it's just, it's such a beautiful community to learn from, because I'm always learning from other people as well. But oh my gosh, thank you. I loved reading for you.
Oh, well, it's been wonderful. And I will put a link to all of Kira's websites and social media in the description, so if anybody wants to stalk her, they can. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Kira, before we say goodbye?
No, not really. I just want to say thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me. It's been an absolute delight.
I've loved it.
I love listening to your brain on astrology too.
Thank God the air's working positively in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant.
No, I can't think of anything else. No, come find me on social media. I'm active most of the time. Or on my website, you can sign up for a newsletter. It comes out about once a month, but it's not, you know, I'm not going to blow your head away. It's not big and huge. It's lots of little tidbits.
No spam.
No, I can't. The idea of sending something once a week would like freak me out.
Oh yeah, me too. Thank you, Kira. Thank you very much. Take care. Speak to you later.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye.